Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Get Inspired and Live in Your Power. And I have another amazing guest on our show today, Rhonda Noordyk. Super excited to have Rhonda on our show. I haven't known her for very long, but it was really fun getting to know her. I got to have just a little 15-minute call beforehand to see if she would be right for our show. And she definitely is. She had some great inspiration. She's doing some amazing things with women, most specifically with divorced women. And I'll just go ahead and share a little bit about Rhonda before we dive into her story. Rhonda is a well-respected divorce financial strategist, and she's also a podcast host. So she has a podcast. Remind me of the name of your podcast.
It's called Disrupting Divorce Conversations for Women.
Awesome. Disrupting Divorce Conversations for Women. So you'll definitely want to check that out after you listen to this podcast episode. Rhonda is also known internationally for her work in pioneering a path for women to navigate through financial aspects of the divorce process. As a strategist, Rhonda helps her clients determine their best next financial move during divorce negotiations. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I know that there are a lot of people that are listening in. They're like, wow, I need that. I need somebody to help me through that. So super excited to have Rhonda on. She's been featured in some really great publications, ST Voyager, Better After 50, Thriving Global, and Medium. And she's also been on lots of different podcasts. And I'll put some of those in the show notes. So you'll want to check that as you're listening to our show today. So thank you, Rhonda, for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm super excited to dive into your story because as we were talking, I know there was really a moment of inspiration. But before we jump into that, I want to talk a little bit about kind of your history and maybe that's going to kind of actually lead into that inspirational moment. Tell us a little bit about before you opened, you have this wellness center called the Women's Financial Wellness Center to help women ask, questions, feel comfortable about finances, those kinds of things. What was your story before that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so it's interesting because I started in the financial industry, in the male-dominated industry, when I was in my mid-20s. I was eager to learn, really wanted to be able to help people was really how that whole thing started. And as I got there, I realized that there was a gap. There was a gap in where I was in my life and where I wanted to be. There was a gap in beliefs. I had surrounded myself with a lot of really successful people who had a lot of knowledge around money and finance. And it caused me to challenge my own thoughts and beliefs, particularly from growing up, right? My dad was an alcoholic. He was a workaholic. He, had a lot of challenges in that regard. And it influenced me as a kid and my relationship with money. So, I really brought that baggage, if you will, with me to the financial industry and stood there looking at, all of the pieces thinking, what do I do with this? How do I impact this? How do I get over there? How do I have a good relationship with money? And what does that look like? And so I spent about 12 years in the financial industry. I was also teaching in higher education. I was an adjunct faculty for business owners and helping them with business and marketing. So I had a really amazing kind of 12-year period that, of course, came with some challenges, which was I was a young professional who really was needing to find her voice. Growing up, again, with some of the dynamics that I mentioned, I was the avoider. I was the passive communicator. I did not like conflict. I avoided it at all costs. And it wasn't serving me as I was in the financial industry. There was some, I don't know if you want to say bullying, but I mean, really some power differential that I was experiencing that I really needed to be able to find my voice. So long story short, I spent a lot of time really finding my passion around educating and empowering women. And we would do educational events and workshops and seminars. And then in 2014, I was sitting in my office. And I always say, like, I was sitting in my office, I was, sitting in an executive office, and I had a really great view overlooking the parking lot. But I had a really fantastic office. And I remember sitting in my chair thinking, what do I want the next 5 years to look like? Really, again, anybody who's been in that spot, your heart sinks because when you realize that it's a different path or a different direction or or a pivot from where you currently are, you're like, I don't know what to do with this information, you know? And I had a client that came into my office shortly after that and threw a business card on my desk. And she's like, Rhonda, you need to talk to these people. And I'm like, well, who are these people? Right. I had never heard of them before, but it was an organization called the Think Global Institute. I mean, who doesn't want to be part of that? Right. And I met with the organizer of that company, and he basically said, Rhonda, we've got some money from corporations to be able to take up to 10 entrepreneurs through a process. And we would love for you to apply. And so I did, had a conversation with them and got accepted into the program. And I remember feeling, Marlene, like that somebody had dropped a gift, right? God had dropped a gift in my lap because I was able to go through a program over the summer, no out-of-pocket cost. We met once a week for 8 hours. And I had one-on-one time with the founder of that organization, who one of the most brilliant minds business wise, I honestly can say that I've ever met. Absolutely fantastic. And so during that summer, I had a chance to unpack what my vision was. I found myself in September that year putting in my resignation with the firm and basically decided, listen, this girl is taking my business plan. This small town girl was taking her business plan. I had leased an office and I was leaving. And nobody really knew what to do with that. My male colleagues were like, do we think the train is going off the tracks? We don't know how she's going to make any money. We don't really know what she's doing, but okay, whatever, you know? So I left, opened up my office, and I remember sitting there thinking, you know, you always think when you make a big change, like you don't really always know what to expect. And I remember feeling like my body went before my emotions. Like it took like 2 to 4 weeks at least for my emotions to just kind of catch up to like, we're really doing this, you know, in the words of, right, like we're really doing this, Harry. Like, where am I going? That was where that journey began for me. And at that moment, I never looked back. I had a lot of fears around it, but I was also really excited. And now looking back, you know, almost, gosh, 9 years later, I'm so grateful that I took that step that led to another step that led to another step. This journey has exceeded my expectations.
Wow, that is so amazing. And I wrote a few notes down as you were talking because there's so many just like pivotal moments right there that if we can just kind of shine a spotlight on some of these, especially for our listeners. So first of all, you had brought some baggage with you from your childhood, you know, from your life before adulthood, before you got into your career and all of that, which, you know, some of our listeners might be in a situation right now, you know, in a marriage or whatever's creating that situation where they've got some baggage. And so the first thing that I wanted to shine a spotlight on is that you were in a situation where you were surrounded by people who had figured out the baggage. You know, they were in a good position financially and all of that. And so that was an opportunity for you to not like look at yourself and say, what's wrong with me? How come I don't have it all together and they do, or whatever? But you were looking at it as a great opportunity, feeling a lot of gratitude for being in a situation where, wow, I can actually kind of look at my life and start understanding this because of these people that are around me. So I think that is amazing right there, that you had the maturity to be able to see that as an opportunity. Because I think a lot of times, you know, when we're in a situation that's not perfect, we tend to judge ourselves for not having it all together, when really this is such a perfect opportunity for us to learn from others. The other thought that came to me was when you had that opportunity, because especially, you know, when we don't feel like we have it all together, if an opportunity falls into our lap, it's like, oh no, I would never be accepted. I'm not even going to apply. You know, I mean, that would be like the natural response, especially where you had lost a voice or you know, weren't really speaking strongly because it wasn't really acceptable in your family. So that was a huge step also, you know, a huge leap out of your comfort zone to step up and have your voice heard of, I deserve this program. You know, this is something that I really want to participate in. So I wanted to especially bring those two out because, because you're working with women that are in these situations, that you're not the norm. I know the people that I've worked with, it sometimes takes a lot of coercing, to get out of that fear long enough to be able to take some really great action. Do you want to add
Yeah.
anything to that?
Well, you know what's interesting, right? Is I think that in the midst of those types of situations, you feel internally like you're an absolute mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember like feeling so disempowered many times. And yet, and yet, there's always this like little bit, I think, within us as women where we're like, we just need to tap into even the smallest mustard seed of strength, right?
Yes.
That we can say, looking back, I don't know exactly where that came from. I'm stubborn. I'm a firstborn. I don't know. God has just wired me to say, I know that I'm afraid. I don't care. I'm doing it anyways.
Yeah. Ignite your inner spark and start each day inspired and empowered with my daily GPS process. I'm Wileen Benson. Daily GPS is the best morning meditation and inspired vision technique that has you co-creating your life with your creator. Inspired shortcuts help you focus on the most important tasks to accomplish your goals faster, unleash your true potential, and transform your life into one that will give you ultimate success and fulfillment. Do it now. Visit WileenBenson.com to download your free daily GPS starter kit and start living in your power today.
And I will also say, I think it's also very important to point out I had amazing people in my life, amazing, who saw the potential in me before I saw it in myself, validated the things I was feeling about myself, right? I mean, amazing, amazing. I mean, I started publicly speaking at 11 years old, and I was writing my own presentations because I had a mentor who invested time. And most of the time, at that time, right, I wasn't paying anybody to help me. I mean, these days I have to pay people to help me, but I didn't have to pay people to help me. They believed so deeply in me. And to this day, am forever grateful for those people that God brought into my life. And I also feel like that is a role that I get to play in my clients' lives because I want to serve them. I have benefited from other people's belief in me, for people standing in the gap for me, for people praying for me, for people, giving of their time and resources and energy to me. I know what that feels like. And now I'm at a point where I'm far enough removed from some of those behaviors. I mean, every once in a while, you're like, it makes a guest appearance. I'm like, where did that come from? But, I've worked really hard to get, and again, with God's grace, I've worked really hard to overcome the anxiety, the passive communication, those fears and things like that. And that's where I think for me, whether people are going through divorce or not, I think the core thing is I want women to be confident. I want them to be able to have that voice. I want them to be leaning into conversations that are uncomfortable. People that know me today, right? I mean, they're like, you were what? Like, I mean, I struggled so deeply with anxiety and panic attacks from my childhood. I wasn't even leaving my house. That was way before, like that was in the early 2000s. I was probably having about 3 panic attacks a day. Would not drive by myself, would not go anywhere alone. I mean, it was just like so challenging. And then today, that I travel by myself. I mean, it's total game changer, right? But I feel like because of where I'm at, I can serve as that sense of, listen, I know where you're at. I've been in that spot. And it's less for me about the divorce. That just happens to be the platform that I'm using to empower women because usually at that point, right, they're so frustrated or have experienced so much pain, or they want something more. Again, those extremes, right, where they're willing to make a decision to invest in themselves to become better. And I can use that platform to be able to help them.
Yeah, I want to, touch on a couple of things, and then I want to kind of come back to that platform of divorce a little bit, because I know for you, your disempowerment came from childhood. You have a marriage, you're married, you haven't experienced that divorce. And so I do want to come back to that because I think a lot of times, people want to follow someone who maybe has been through what they have experienced. But just because you haven't had that experience of divorce per se, doesn't mean that you don't understand, that same feeling of disempowerment, of, not having your voice be heard, not even feeling confident to speak up or whatever. The thing that I, just want to keep going back to also is that you said yes, that when that situation, that opportunity did come up, you said yes. And you talked about how you had people in your life, and our listeners might be thinking, yeah, I don't have anybody that way, that's doing that for me. But I promise you, if you open your heart to it and you really start looking around, there are people who have been offering. And a lot of times we are so down on ourselves, or we just don't feel like we deserve or whatever, that we don't even notice it, or we're not willing to say yes because we just don't feel like we deserve it. Anyway, I wanted to point that out, because if you will look around, there are people, and I know because I do it for other people, and sometimes they don't even realize, they don't say yes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm offering to do this for free. Like, why would you not say yes? Anyway, and then you made those choices. You did say yes, never looked back. And that is so common amongst my guests that I have on the show here, where they got that inspiration, they took action, they threw their body over the fence. It's like, I don't even know what I'm going to feel tomorrow, but I'm doing this. And that is where everything starts.
I love that visual, because yes, that is what it feels like, right? You're like, oh my gosh, what is on the other side of this? For sure.
Awesome. I know that you are launching a journal in April, and we're doing this, recording a little bit early. I know we're going to be actually launching this episode about the same time as your journal's coming out. So I want to have you talk a little bit about that, a resource that people could say yes to. So tell us a little bit about that journal that you're going to be launching.
Yes, absolutely. So it's interesting because I have always felt like there's a book in me, right? I mean, a lot of people might say, oh, I feel like I'm supposed to write a book. And I've done some anthologies, which are, the compilation of stories and things like that. I started to actually write an individual book about a year ago, and really felt like it wasn't the right time. Got a ways through that, and I just wasn't quite ready to kind of unveil my whole story, I guess. And so I decided to make a change, and still wanted to be able to provide value and share a glimpse of my story. And so we converted that kind of full book into more of a journal format, which is, I'm sharing a little bit about my relationship with money, a little history on kind of how I went through that process, and then giving women the opportunity to join with me on their journey. And what I did was I love acronyms. Like, anybody who's going through my programs or check, I love acronyms. I think it's the educator in me who, I just think it makes it easier. And so I took the word confidence, and each of the letters is associated with a little bit of a background, reflection, and then some practical activities or things that people can do to help build their confidence. It really is designed for women that are kind of contemplating or going through divorce, that really want to go beyond the breakup and really lean into building their financial confidence. And I have said from the day that I started my business that, if I can help one woman change her relationship with money, I've empowered her for a lifetime. I've given her the tools that she needs to move forward after, they've gotten to the other side and they can see the light after the darkness, right? To really empower them. And this, I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this resource, because I'm anticipating that it is going to be as impactful for others as other people have been for me. And I do mention a couple of the authors that I read over the years, or people that I've had on my podcast that have impacted my journey. And I look forward to hopefully being that for somebody else.
Beautiful. So a couple things. I'm seeing that this is a resource. It's kind of something to hold on to. It's like a tangible thing that you can help you walk through that journey. And I know that is what you've shared with me, you know, that you're so passionate about helping women. You don't want to see any woman taken advantage of. You don't want to see, you know, you want to be able to be an advocate for those who can't really speak up for themselves. And so it's great, you know, if they can hire you as a coach. And, you know, it's great also to have something that's a little maybe smaller investment at the moment while they're kind of muddling through that process, but to also have something that they can hold on to, almost like holding hands with this journal, you know, with you vicariously through the journal to help them through the process. So I think that's wonderful. That's really awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to touch on also your degree in communications. We haven't really talked a lot about your educational degree. And I know when you and I were talking, I was seeing all the dots were connecting of how all the different ways that communications really fits in. And I remember you said when you had that degree in communications, you didn't really see it as relevant or, you know, how it was going to really help you or whatever, but it really does boil down to this is what your gift is. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've learned, how that communications really fits into everything that you do?
Yeah. So I think, you know, when you're working particularly around money, people like to think, oh, she went to school for business or, you know, whatever. And that really wasn't on the radar at that time. I'd started college as a fitness management major because I loved fitness and wanted to be able to be kind of that coach slash, you know, encourager. Probably about the first year in college, my professors were really starting to notice, like, Rhonda, you've got really great writing skills. You've got really great public speaking skills. And I thought I could actually do that. Like, I remember being on your book or some, you know, some of those kinds of things. And I was like, I could actually do that. Like, oh, that's interesting. And so I actually ended up switching majors and did communications with a journalism emphasis. And what that taught me was to ask really good questions. It taught me really good grammar, painfully. And again, I had amazing professors who totally encouraged me and believed in me. But one of the things we did in my communication law class, my junior year of college, was we had to do a mock. They selected two people in the class to do this mock trial, basically. And I was advocating on one side and whatever. And it was awesome. I won my case and really left there like, okay. So left college and thought, you know, I've got some really great skills. I love what I'm doing. I didn't really know exactly where that was going to unfold. I started working at a nonprofit agency, worked there for 5 years, leveraged my communication skills in that regard. And then it was shortly after that I started almost simultaneously, started in the financial industry simultaneously, right? I started in the financial industry. I was also teaching in higher education. And I mean, I don't think it was by accident, right? But I started in the financial industry saying, I will consider, right, coming to work with this firm if I can do one thing. And they're like, what is it? I want to give presentations. And they're like, okay, we'll check because nobody else really actually ever wanted to do them. And I'm like, I'm only doing it if I can talk to people and give presentations. And they're like, okay. And that's where I think some of the challenges came in because I was seen very early on as somebody who, yeah, she's got a great personality. She's great at communicating, but she's not really the math girl or she's not really good at numbers or, you know, that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of started to play again in that confidence piece early on was, oh yeah, well, she's great at marketing and a great communicator. Yes, those are all great things. But as I started to continue down that path in the financial industry, I had, again, people are like, Rhonda, I think you'd actually be really good at this. I think you'd be actually really good at that. And I took took the exams and all of that jazz, and I passed on the first time. And they were like, you passed on the first time? Like, what is going? Yes, like, yes, I have a great personality and I'm also smart. So like, you know, and I work hard. Like I spent a lot of time behind the scenes. And I remember at one point literally laying down in the floor of my living room, like, this is a lot. Like, you know, this is like, okay, are you going to just get up and keep studying or are you going to just lay there? Like get up and get going, you know? And it was, again, all of those defining moments along the way. And that was, I think, part of the challenge too, is, you know, in leaving the financial industry, I left behind those licenses that I had worked so hard for. And it was hard. So anybody who, has been in those places where you've invested, you've taken those exams, but I really felt that God was calling me to be that advocate, the boots on the ground person, the practical, advocate for people, particularly women that were finding themselves in a really challenging spot, relationally and financially. That I think was one of the parts too, where people are like, yeah, she's, this has gone off the rails. But again, we're going to have those times in our lives when people don't understand. And I could clearly articulate my vision on what I was doing, and here we are.
Yeah, I love that. The confidence piece, and I know you've got your acronym in it's in your course, right? Or is it in your journal?
Yeah, the confidence acronym is in the journal.
Okay.
And then I do have a program that's got an acronym too, because that's what I do.
Perfect. Okay. So the confidence piece is really big for you. And what you're sharing with me about you leaving all the the credibility of those letters behind your name, all those certifications, whatever, you left that because of your passion, like throwing your body over the fence, and just throwing your heart over the fence, and your body has to follow it. And I think that is the definition of confidence, is when you have that internal dialogue within yourself, which I feel like that's a way to communicate, that's a language in itself, that language that you talk to yourself, and really getting honest with yourself and listening to yourself. And then making those choices based on the confidence, whatever happens, this is my path, this is where I need to go. So I definitely know that you are in your passion, you're in your genius, you are living according to your spiritual gifts. Yeah, and you're developing yourself at the same time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I want to tell, or I'm going to actually have you tell about a free offer that you have for anyone listening here. And this isn't necessarily just for women who are going through divorce. It's a budget template for women. So you've got the journal coming out in a few months. Hopefully it'll be about the same time that this episode goes live. And you also have this free offer for any woman. And do you want to talk a little bit about your budget template?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did was created a template that gives you current expenses and a space for projected expenses. And the reason that that's helpful is because your situation now might look a little bit different than where you're headed or what that might look like. And what I'll say about it is, the budgeting, the budgeting template, the budget in and of itself, right? Taking a look at what's coming in and what's going out is never sexy or glamorous. It's never fun, right? But there's things that we can do to make it a little bit more fun. So, whether we're lighting a candle, whether we're, grabbing a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, grabbing a blanket, finding ways that we can make it a little bit more enjoyable is always helpful, because my perspective is the budgeting piece is the baseline for all of our future conversations. It's going to be, Rhonda, do I, buy a house or do I rent? Rhonda, how much can I afford? I don't know, right? Like we got to kind of get a detail, a little bit of a baseline on what is going on. So it serves as foundation for people, no matter what direction they're going. And as I was thinking about something that would be really kind of a general opportunity, that was something that certainly I thought might be helpful.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm actually going to reach out and grab that from you because I am excited to see what I discover. I actually graduated in accounting. So I do have an accounting degree, an associate's degree in accounting, and I love numbers. I'm also a very visual person, so I get to use both sides of my brain, which is really fun. It sounds like you do too. And so I'm really excited to see what you have to offer there. So I'm just going to invite everybody to go to the show notes for that link, because we've got a link there for you to click on to be able to get that free budget template for women. And then also I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how to get in touch with Rhonda. And before I do that, Rhonda, because I want to give you just a couple minutes to think about this, I want to, as we're finishing up, just to give like one final piece of advice for someone, whether they're going through a divorce or if they're just in a situation where they're just feeling like they aren't confident with themselves, or they don't really know what their next step is. And maybe they're having a hard time having that internal dialogue or speaking out loud of, what they want. They don't really know what that clear path is for them. So somebody's in a situation like that, whatever the situation is, whether it's divorce or something different, that what would be maybe the first step that you would recommend for them to help them get into a place of confidence or to be able to use their voice? So I'll let you think about that for just a minute. And I want to just share really quick how to get in touch with Rhonda, because I know there's probably lots of people that are thinking, I need to talk to her. And so she's got her email. And again, all this is going to be in the show notes. It's info@WFWCLLC.com, which stands for Women's Financial Wellness Center, right? LLC.com, WFWCLLC.com. And then her website is WFWCdivorce.com. So Women's Financial Wellness Center, that another acronym, right? WFWCdivorce.com. And then also on social media, I'll have her links there for her accounts. So back to you, Rhonda. What
Yes.
would be just like that first step piece of advice that you could give for women who are kind of not feeling confident, but don't really know what that next step is?
So actually, I thank you for giving me just a couple moments to think about that. So I would say the very first thing is it's kind of under the bucket of awareness, right? Revisiting what's important to you. What are your values, right? And I remember when I was in the financial industry and everybody's like, oh, whatever, Rhonda, like, that doesn't really matter. Just, talk about stocks and bonds and insurance. But no, like we as women need to get to the core of what's important to us. And when we do that, I think then it helps us in future conversations. We can surround ourselves with people that not necessarily are in alignment with the values, but honor the values, right? There's a respectfulness on values. So I would say get in touch with your values. That's something that you can do. And then surround yourself with people that respect those values and that can pour into you. And it's okay to borrow somebody else's confidence until you get your own. I lived off of the confidence of other women and men, right? Until I could get to that point where I could walk on my own. And it's okay. It's not a sign of weakness. It's okay to do that, right? And borrow their confidence until you build that muscle up for yourself.
Awesome. I think that's wonderful advice. And that's what you did, right? Is that moment when you were thinking about what do I want to be doing in 5 years? And it gave you the courage and the confidence to take that leap and say yes to some things that, maybe you were a little bit not feeling 100% confident in, but because you knew what your values were, and it's like, I don't care. This is what I need to be doing. Yeah.
It serves as fuel, that's for sure. It serves as fuel when we want to, and sometimes you just have to do it, because otherwise if you sit and you wait too long, you don't do it. I mean, and the thought of not having taken that step is so overwhelming. I think sometimes we also have to think, what if I don't do this? Like, what is that going to look like? And I know that's uncomfortable, right? For us to think of that way, but certainly that's a powerful way to look at it too.
Yeah. And you're such a great example of that. Like you said, 9 years ago, making that choice and that you never looked back. And it's been the absolute best decision that you've ever made. And I know that has been very consistent with everybody that I've talked to on this show, everybody that I've interviewed that is now living in their power. It's you get that inspiration based on those solid values and what you need to be doing, and making those decisions and taking action. It will take you to a really good place. It will take you to a place where you're living in your power. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rhonda. Appreciate you being on the show. This has been very enlightening, very fun. It's just been really fun visiting with you, and I'm super excited to be able to get this episode out to all these women who can really use what you have shared. For our listeners, thank you for joining us. And until next time, go out, get inspired, and live in your power.